Previously, Park, the Mafia who treats timing like a toy, proposed to Kalia amid the fresh earth of her stepfather's grave, turning grief into a global spectacle that sent cameras flashing and hashtags soaring. Kalia, fury blazing beneath black wool and red-rimmed eyes, dragged him to court for emotional damages and demanded half his empire, transforming the courtroom into a flirtatious farce where objections flew like sparks and the judge's gavel barely contained laughter. Case adjourned, love unscathed, they returned to their penthouse for pillow fights, cologne thefts, and towel-clad chaos until one candlelit night she challenged him to propose again without graves or cameras. He vanished into the night with the ring, only for his car to be discovered abandoned on a lonely roadside, engine cold, the navy velvet box lying beside the tire like a fallen promise. Now Kalia waits at the window, the city glittering below, the ring on her dresser beside their courtroom photo, while Park remains missing and the story refuses to end. The bedroom was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against the walls and made every small sound, a creak in the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren, feel amplified. Kalia sat at the edge of the bed, her hair tied in a loose knot, eyes bleary from yet another sleepless night. Across from her, the second coffee cup sat untouched, slowly cooling, a silent testament to the absence she refused to acknowledge. It had been a week since Park vanished. 7 days of unanswered calls, no messages, no glimpses of his impossible smirk. The world carried on outside their penthouse windows, but inside, time seemed suspended. Every morning, she still set 2 cups of coffee, as if the ritual could summon him back, as if the act alone could convince the universe to right its wrongs. Her phone had become a lifeline and a torture device all at once. She checked it every hour, refreshing obsessively, rereading old texts, even replaying his voice notes. Each good morning, gorgeousness, or did you remember your almond milk, carried a ghost of warmth, a reminder of the chaos and laughter he brought into her life. The messages made her ache, simultaneously comforting and cutting her open. Her heart whispered that he was still alive somewhere, maybe tangled in some misadventure that only Park could survive. Logic, however, waged a cruel battle, telling her that perhaps she was losing it, imagining signs where there were none, clinging to hope like a lifeline in an empty ocean. The bed beside her remained unnervingly empty, the sheets untouched, the pillow unmoved. Kalia sank back against the headboard, feeling the loneliness pressing in harder than grief ever had. The absence of Park was not just a void of presence, it was a gaping hole in the rhythm of her life, a dissonance she could not reconcile. She missed the chaos he brought, the way their arguments bled into flirtation, the way even a simple glance could ignite her entire world. And yet, even in this emptiness, a stubborn spark lingered, a quiet insistence that he was out there somewhere, and that their story was far from over. The office smelled faintly of stale coffee and despair, a fitting setting for Detective Minute's exhausted attempt at investigative heroics. Kalia sat stiffly in the hard leather chair, legs crossed, staring at him with a mixture of impatience and disbelief. He shuffled papers, cleared his throat, and then, inevitably, asked the same tired questions he had asked for days. Did he seem stressed before he disappeared? Kalia let out a long, dramatic sigh, rolling her eyes. He was Park. Has always stressed, usually about my tone of voice. Detective Minute blinked. Your tone of voice? Yes, Kalia replied, leaning back, arms crossed. The way I say things. He claims it's emotionally hazardous to his heart and well-being. I've practically ruined him daily for the past 4 years. Minute scribbled in his notebook, muttering something about relationship dynamics complicating disappearance cases, though it was clear he had no idea how to document sarcasm. Well, keep searching, he said finally, with all the enthusiasm of a man who had accepted futility as his career mantra. Kalia tilted her head, resting her cheek on her palm. Sure. At this rate, you'll find him before you do. Detective Minute cleared his throat, shuffled his feet, and left with a resigned nod, leaving Kalia alone with the silence that had become her constant companion. Once the door clicked shut, she turned toward the bedroom and wandered over to Park's closet. Sliding open the doors, a familiar wave of his cologne, arrogant, alluring, and oddly comforting, washed over her. It filled the room like a tangible presence, the scent of him clinging to every suit, every jacket, every meticulously folded shirt. She inhaled deeply, letting the memory of him sink into her senses, as if somehow his essence could anchor her fraying nerves. Her fingers brushed over the tailored jackets, lingering on the one he always wore when he had that infuriatingly charming smirk. She muttered under her breath, her voice equal parts exasperation and affection. "You better not be dead, you infuriating piece of fine furniture." Kalia chuckled softly at her own words, the sound echoing through the apartment. She was alone, but the apartment was anything but empty. Every object, every scent, every slight indentation in the sheets reminded her that Park had existed, and that he had left too soon. Her heart clenched, but a stubborn ember of hope glowed beneath the ache. He was out there somewhere, she decided, and she would find him. Whether Detective Minute caught up or not, Kalia had her own ways of chasing chaos, and she wasn't about to stop now. The apartment had become a shrine to absence. Kalia moved through it on autopilot, a ghost walking among the echoes of Park's presence. She woke at the same time every morning, brewed 2 cups of coffee, poured one into a mug for him that she never touched, and set it across from her. Then she went through the motions, work emails, breakfast, staring out the window at the city that seemed oblivious to her torment. Days blended into nights, and the rhythm of her life was punctuated only by the faint, unrelenting sound of loneliness. She caught herself muttering to the empty rooms, as if speaking aloud could draw him back or at least keep the silence from consuming her entirely. "Park," she said one evening, pacing the living room, "if you're ghosting me, fine. Just don't mess up the Wi-Fi while you haunt the place." Her voice bounced off the walls, met only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the building settling. She paused, listening to the echoes, wondering if perhaps the apartment had grown accustomed to his absence as much as she had. Every little sound made her flinch. A car door slamming outside could be him returning, a neighbor's laughter might be his chuckle, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen could mean he'd somehow snuck back. Her imagination worked overtime, painting shadows in the corners as if they were Park himself, leaning casually, smirking, arms crossed. She found herself talking aloud more and more, leaving messages on the kitchen counter for a man who couldn't respond. "Don't touch my snacks," she warned, or, "Yes, I still make the bed perfectly even though you're not here." Sometimes, she laughed at the absurdity, sometimes she cried quietly into her coffee. Even her friends noticed the change. They tried calling, visiting, distracting her, but Kalia's attention was split between the world and the empty side of the bed, the quiet apartment, the faint scent of cologne lingering in every room. Her life had become a constant oscillation between hope and despair, the mundane transformed into suspense, every moment a reminder that Park was missing, and yet, impossibly, still everywhere in her mind. By nightfall, she would sit by the window, legs drawn to her chest, listening for any sign of him, a footstep, a car engine, a familiar laugh. Her heart refused to give up, even if the rest of her senses screamed that he might never return. In the stillness, she whispered once more, almost pleading, almost joking. "Park, you better be planning a grand entrance soon, or I swear I will haunt you and you won't like the version of me you'll see whenever we meet again, even in heaven." The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting stark, cold shadows across the nearly empty aisles of the 24-hour grocery store. Kalia's reflection in the polished floor looked back at her like a weary, slightly deranged raccoon, dark circles under her eyes, hair messy, an expression somewhere between exasperation and determination. She clutched a shopping basket in one hand, trying to distract herself from the gnawing anxiety that had taken root over the past week. She wandered toward the instant noodles aisle, her mind half on her missing boyfriend, half on the ridiculous fact that she was wandering the store at midnight like a character in a cheap thriller. Reaching for a pack of her favorite spicy ramen, she froze. Something wasn't right. She felt it before she saw it, the subtle, unnerving sensation of being followed. Her head snapped around. Down the aisle, a figure in a black hoodie mirrored her every step, keeping distance but close enough to send a chill crawling down her spine. Kalia's heart raced. Who the hell is this? She clutched her basket tighter and deliberately moved to the cereal aisle, hoping the bright packaging would obscure her from the shadowy figure. But when she glanced back, he was there, shifting subtly, maintaining that same eerie, deliberate pace. Panic began to prick at her, but Kalia's instincts, honed from years of dealing with Park's absurd chaos, kicked in. She ducked behind a stack of cornflakes, pressing herself into the cardboard fortress and holding her breath. She peeked through a tiny gap, spotting the figure slowly scanning the shelves, completely unaware that she had vanished from sight. She muttered under her breath, rolling her eyes. This is not funny. Minutes dragged on like hours. Kalia plotted her next move, crouching behind cereal boxes, strategizing like a general in a tiny domestic battlefield. Each shuffle of feet, each rustle of packaging, made her flinch. She wanted to scream, run, demand answers. But also, absurdly, she couldn't help feeling a spark of adrenaline-fueled amusement. If Park were here, he'd be laughing at me, she thought. The figure in the hoodie had just his posture, perhaps sensing something, perhaps simply browsing, but Kalia's mind ran at full speed. Her heart pounded, palms sweaty, adrenaline surging. This encounter was equal parts terrifying and ridiculous, exactly the kind of chaos she had learned to expect in her life with Park. The man in the black hoodie turned sharply toward her, and Kalia's adrenaline spiked like a live wire. Her eyes widened, heart hammering, as she reflexively grabbed the nearest object within reach, a loaf of sandwich bread, and swung it with all the dramatic flair she could muster. The soft, doughy projectile hit him squarely in the face with a satisfying thwack. "Oh, lady! What the hell?" the man shouted, clutching his cheek. Kalia froze for a heartbeat, then whipped around to face him fully, flailing her hands as if to explain herself. "Why are you stalking? Do you work here, or are you auditioning for a spy movie?" The man blinked, his initial irritation dissolving into bemusement. "I do work here," he said, voice wary. "Why hit me with that?" Kalia's cheeks flushed crimson. She dropped the loaf, muttering apologies that spilled out faster than she could form them coherently. "Oh my word, I'm so sorry." But the words trailed off because her pulse refused to let her stand still. She didn't wait for forgiveness. She bolted for the automatic doors, flinging them open and racing into the empty night. She skidded across the parking lot, chest heaving, when her eyes caught movement across the street. Another figure, hood up, eerily still, watched her with unsettling patience. Unlike the first man, this one didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't react, just stood there, as if carved from shadow. Her stomach knotted. Not again. Not tonight. Panic clawed up her spine, mixing with the absurd humor that had always been part of her life with Park. She could imagine the headlines if anyone saw her now. Woman attacked grocery worker, then evaded unnamed stalker in midnight thriller. Her legs started moving faster, pumping through the empty streets with a kind of reckless speed that made her feel both terrified and strangely alive. Her purse bounced against her hip, her slippers squeaked against the pavement, and every nerve screamed that she shouldn't stop, not to look back, not to catch her breath, not to question her sanity. She darted behind a parked car, crouching low and peering around the edge. The still figure remained, hooded and silent, patient, almost mocking. Kalia swallowed hard, adrenaline burning through her veins. Somewhere deep down, she knew one thing: whether it was Park or another absurd twist in her life, tonight was going to be unforgettable. Kalia's feet slapped against the pavement, the echo of her slippers loud enough to make her jump at her own noise. Adrenaline surged through her veins, propelling her forward with a kind of reckless determination she hadn't felt since Park had proposed at her stepdad's funeral. Every glance over her shoulder made her stomach lurch. The hooded figure followed, calm and steady, a shadow in motion, neither speeding up nor slowing down. She zigzagged through narrow alleys, tossing groceries from one hand to the other, using the bag almost like a weapon. Instant noodles clinked against a carton of juice, but she didn't care. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out the faint sounds of the city around her. By the time she reached the familiar security of her building, Kalia was breathless, lungs burning, and hair sticking to the damp sheen of sweat on her forehead. She slammed the door behind her, twisted the lock, and leaned against it, chest heaving, eyes wide. "Okay. Breathe. It's fine. I can survive this," she muttered, voice shaky but fierce. She allowed herself a few shaky breaths, trying to convince her racing heart that the danger was over, at least for now. Her mind spun, running through every scenario, every rational explanation, every absurd Park-related possibility. Surely it was him, right? It has to be him, she thought. Only Park would stalk me like this and somehow make it romantic in his twisted way. Her gaze landed on the small drawer beside the door. With trembling hands, she opened it and grabbed the small handgun she kept hidden. Park's idea, ironically. Now, the gun felt both heavy and comforting in her hand, a tiny talisman against whatever awaited her outside. She crouched by the door, peering through the blinds, muscles tense, ready to react. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was it Park? Was it a copycat admirer? Or just some random weirdo drawn to her midnight shopping habits? Come on, she whispered to herself, teeth clenched. Show me your face already. I can handle this. I will handle this. Somewhere in the quiet streets outside, the figure paused. Kalia's breath caught. Her heart pounded. And for the first time since the grocery store incident began, she realized that whatever happened next, it was going to be unforgettable. Kalia's heart was pounding so fiercely she thought it might leap out of her chest. Her hands, still gripping the small gun she had pulled from the drawer earlier, trembled with adrenaline. The night air swallowed her words. The street was quiet, eerily so, and for a moment she thought it might all have been a hallucination, a cruel trick played by her sleep-deprived brain. Then a faint buzzing reached her ears. At first, she squinted, unsure if it was real or just her imagination. The buzzing grew, rhythmic, mechanical yet almost musical, rising in volume until it became impossible to ignore. Kalia's breath caught, and she pressed herself against the doorframe leading to the balcony, eyes scanning the dark street. Her jaw dropped. Hundreds of drones were rising from the pavement, their tiny lights blinking like a constellation come to life. They hovered and shifted, moving with impossible precision, and then, as if choreographed by the universe itself, began forming letters. Each glowing word burned into the night sky. Will you marry me? Kalia froze. The absurdity, audacity, and sheer romance of it all hit her like a tidal wave. It was Park. It had to be. Only he could orchestrate such a theatrical, ridiculous, and heart-melting stunt. Her legs trembled, knees weak, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, laughing and gasping at the same time. For the first time since he disappeared, a flood of relief and joy washed over her. All the worry, the sleepless nights, the absurd grocery store chase, the lonely mornings, it all crystallized into this moment. Kalia stepped outside taking the stairs, the night air cool against her flushed cheeks. Her mind raced, every nerve taut with fear, anticipation, and an undercurrent of absurd hope. The hooded figure moved forward, each step deliberate. Kalia's heart jumped into her throat. And then, with a flourish that seemed almost theatrical, he pulled down the hood. It was Park. Her eyes went wide. Handsome, unshaven, eyes sparkling with mischief and apology, he grinned at her like she was the only person in the universe. Time slowed. Her chest tightened, part from anger, part from the impossible relief and thrill of seeing him alive. He dropped to one knee, pulling the slightly dented but still gleaming ring box from his pocket. Third time's the charm, he asked, voice full of hope and that teasing edge she could never resist. Kalia stared at him for 2 seconds. 2 whole, agonizing, breathtaking seconds. Then her hand shot out. Slap. She followed immediately with a forceful, no-nonsense kiss, a whirlwind of pent-up frustration, longing, and relief, and before he could even register, a swift kick between the legs. He groaned, doubled over, and planted the box on the ground beside him. Park, I deserved that. Kalia, you deserved all 3. Her laughter bubbled up uncontrollably, tears streaking her face as she slapped his shoulder again, a mix of affection and exasperation. Do you know what you put me through? She demanded, wiping her eyes. Park straightened slightly, wincing, hands resting over his midsection, but his grin never faltered. A dramatic romantic sequel? He offered, tone light but earnest. Kalia rolled her eyes, a laugh escaping through her frustration. You're impossible. He leaned back just enough to meet her gaze, one eyebrow raised. But you love impossible. She shook her head, smirking through her tears. I do. I really do. For a long moment, they simply stood there, the night alive with stars, the street quiet except for the distant hum of the city. The drones above still shimmered faintly, leaving traces of their earlier spectacle. Chaos, mischief, and love had collided once again, leaving them breathless, exhilarated, and impossibly, irreversibly together. And in that perfect, absurdly romantic moment, Kalia finally let herself believe that sometimes, impossible was exactly what life, and love, was meant to be. The night had settled into a quiet lull, the city below humming softly like a distant lullaby. Kalia and Park sat side by side on the porch, wrapped in a thick, mismatched blanket that smelled faintly of him and faintly of burnt ramen from a frantic grocery run earlier. The noodles she had risked her dignity, and possibly her life, to buy were now steaming between them, held precariously in 2 disposable cups. Kalia slurped a bite, wincing at the overly spicy broth. "You know," she began, chewing slowly, "normal people just propose in restaurants. Dim lighting, candles, maybe some awkward waiter spilling wine. That's it. Done." Park took a sip of his cup, tilting his head toward her with that infuriating smirk that had caused her weeks of anxiety and sleepless nights. "Normal people aren't us," he said casually, voice low and teasing. She blinked at him, smirk tugging at her lips despite herself. "Yeah," she muttered, her heart swelling and cracking all at once. And thank God for that. They ate in companionable silence for a few moments, the kind of silence that spoke more than words ever could, full of shared history, chaos, laughter, and love. Park reached over and draped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer so her head rested comfortably against him. Kalia leaned into him, inhaling the faint scent of his cologne mixed with city air and her lingering stress. Above them, the last drone from his spectacular proposal still hovered, its soft light painting their faces with shimmering words. "Can I get some?" Kalia chuckled softly, the sound breaking the quiet of the night, and Park's grin widened, echoing her amusement. The absurdity, the danger, the fear, the heartbreak, and finally the joy of it all coalesced into a single, perfect moment. Chaotic, romantic, and impossibly theirs. She looked up at the hovering lights and whispered, half to herself, half to him, "You are completely insane, Park." "But somehow, I wouldn't have it any other way." He kissed the top of her head, laughing softly. "Insanity's much more fun with you, Kalia Jenkins." And as the night wrapped them in warmth, light, and laughter, they sat together, the remnants of adrenaline and noodles mingling with love and relief. The city moved on around them, oblivious to their little corner of perfection. But here, on this porch, wrapped in a blanket, their world was exactly as it should be, messy, unpredictable, chaotic, and beautifully alive. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll always be the first to catch my new stories.